You just touched your face. Maybe you didn't notice. Maybe your hand drifted up to your cheek, or your chin, or your nose, and by the time your brain registered it, the moment had already passed. You weren't thinking about it. You weren't trying to do it. It just happened. And it will happen again, probably within the next few minutes. The average person touches their face somewhere between 200 and 800 times a day. That number sounds impossible until you start paying attention. And once you do, you almost can't stop yourself from doing it even more. But here is what nobody tells you. That gesture, that automatic, unconscious, unstoppable movement, is one of the oldest things your body still does. It is not a bad habit. It is not a nervous tic. It is a survival behavior so deeply wired into your nervous system that it has outlasted fire, language, agriculture, and the internet. The real answer to why you touch your face is far stranger than you think. Start with the numbers. In 2015, a research team at the University of New South Wales, led by Kwame Asani, published an observational study tracking medical students during their normal daily activities. They weren't sick. They weren't anxious. They were just going about their day. On average, each student touched their face 23 times per hour. Nearly half of those touches involved the mouth, nose, or eyes, the exact entry points for airborne and contact pathogens. A later study published in the American Journal of Infection Control found similar results across a broader population. Face touching is not a quirk of nervous people or distracted teenagers. It is universal, relentless, and almost entirely unconscious. So why does your body keep doing it? To understand that, you have to go back. Not decades, not centuries, hundreds of thousands of years. Your face is one of the most information-dense regions of your entire body. It holds your primary sensory organs, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears. It is the surface through which you process most of your understanding of the world. And from the very beginning, the human body evolved a reflex to monitor it constantly. Think about what your ancestors were dealing with. Insects, parasites, dust, debris, and plant material that could blind or infect. Tiny wounds near the eyes or mouth that could kill within days if left untended. For the vast majority of human history, your face was simultaneously your most powerful asset and your most dangerous vulnerability. Grooming behaviors in primates are among the most studied in all of behavioral biology. Franz de Waal, the primatologist whose decades of work at the Yerkes National Primate Research Center reshaped how scientists think about animal social behavior, documented in extraordinary detail how chimpanzees and bonobos spend hours each day grooming their own bodies and the bodies of those around them. This is not vanity. It is survival maintenance, social bonding, and neurological regulation all happening at once. Humans retain that reflex. It just went internal. When you touch your face, you are almost never doing it in response to a conscious decision. The movement originates in a neural loop that bypasses your prefrontal cortex almost entirely, the part of your brain responsible for deliberate thought and planning. Instead, it routes through older structures, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, the parts of your brain that manage automated, habitual, deeply ingrained motor behavior. This is the same system that lets you drive a familiar route without consciously thinking about every turn. The same system that catches you before you fall without you deciding to throw your arm out. It is ancient, fast, and almost impossible to override with willpower alone. And there is something else happening at the same time. Touching your face activates a dense network of sensory receptors in your skin, particularly around the lips, nose, and cheeks, where receptor density is among the highest anywhere on your body. The stimulation of these receptors sends a cascade of signals up through the trigeminal nerve, one of the largest and most complex cranial nerves in the human skull. That cascade has a measurable calming effect on your nervous system. Researcher Tiffany at the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami has spent over 3 decades documenting the neurological effects of self-touch. Her work consistently shows that tactile self-stimulation, touching your own body, reduces cortisol, lowers heart rate, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. In other words, when you touch your face, your body is self-soothing. It is doing in one unconscious gesture what a therapist might spend an hour trying to help you achieve deliberately. You do it more when you're stressed. You do it more when you're bored. You do it more when you're trying to concentrate, when you're reading something difficult, when you are in a conversation that makes you uncomfortable, when you're sitting in a waiting room wondering what comes next. The more activated your nervous system becomes, the more your body reaches for its oldest, fastest calming tool, your face. Now here is where it gets strange. Researchers studying deception and nonverbal communication have long noticed that face-touching spikes dramatically in specific emotional contexts. Paul Ekman, the psychologist whose work on facial expressions and microexpressions became the foundation for modern deception detection, identified face-touching as one of the most consistent behavioral markers of cognitive overload and emotional concealment. When your brain is working harder than usual, managing a lie, suppressing an emotion, try to remember something painful, it reaches for a self-regulatory behavior. Face-touching is the reflex that emerges fastest because it is so deeply trained. It is not that liars touch their face. It is that anyone under pressure touches their face. The liar just happens to be under more pressure more consistently. This is also why negotiators, therapists, and interrogators are trained to notice it. Not because a single touch means anything by itself, but because a cluster of face touches appearing suddenly when a specific topic is raised tells you something about where the internal pressure is. The implications for modern life are strange and a little uncomfortable. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, public health officials around the world issued a simple directive: stop touching your face. It sounds achievable. It sounds like the kind of thing a conscious, rational adult should be able to manage for a few weeks or even a few hours. It proved nearly impossible for most people. Studies conducted in the early months of 2020 showed that face-touching rates did not significantly decrease even among people who were actively trying to stop. Some research suggested that the act of concentrating on not touching your face, the cognitive effort of monitoring a behavior that normally runs on autopilot, actually increased anxiety levels, which in turn triggered more face-touching. You were trying to override an ancient reflex with a conscious rule, and the reflex was winning. This is not a failure of willpower. It is a collision between two different systems of your brain operating on completely different timescales. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of your conscious intentions, is slow, deliberate, and expensive in terms of cognitive resources. The subcortical systems driving your face-touching reflex are fast, effortless, and have had hundreds of thousands of years of practice. When the two systems compete directly, the older one usually wins. Not because you are weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. There is something quietly profound about that. The very behavior that public health authorities asked you to eliminate was not a product of modern distraction or bad hygiene habits. It was a product of the same evolutionary pressures that built your immune system, your social instincts, your capacity for language. The hand drifting toward your face is the same hand that groomed your ancestors clean of insects on the savannah. The same reflex that kept wounds away from the eyes of creatures who lived or died by whether they could see the predator coming. You are not careless when you touch your face. You are ancient. And here is the part that should stay with you. The next time your hand moves toward your face, the next time you feel your fingers brush your nose or rest against your lips without you deciding to do it, you are watching hundreds of thousands of years of human survival play out in real time. You are watching your body do something that no conscious effort fully invented and no amount of social pressure has fully erased. The average person touches their face somewhere between 200 and 800 times a day. You just did it again.